Добро утро на всички. Добре дошли на, мисля, че шестото или седмото издание на международната конференция Music Talks, част от професионалната програма на A2 Jazz Festival. Започваме с първия панел, който е много специален по отношение на това, че трябва все по-добре и по-добре да разбираме как работи културата, защото зад сцената и извън творческата част стоят много различни и много важни процеси, които касаят и влияят други аспекти от обществения и икономическия живот. Панелът Measuring Success или измерване на успеха, разбиране на икономическото, социално и влияние на марката, на бранда на фестивалите върху съответното място на провеждане е наистина ключова тема, която A2 Jazz Festival разглежда последните няколко години и все по-задълбочено. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 7th edition of Music Talks Conference. We are starting now with the first panel, which is dedicated to the economic and social values of the festivals and cultural events at all, which topic is in the radar of A2 Jazz Festival since many years ago, because we have to understand more and better how culture works in social, cultural, and economic direction and its values. It's a pleasure for me to introduce you the first panel, and just to say, which is important, that this conference is part of the professional program of A2 Jazz Festival, and it's supported by Sofia Municipality cultural program and Upbeat, the European showcase platform for world music. So let me introduce Mr. Petar Ganev as our moderator of the panel. Mr. Mike Duignan, Miss Elena Chardakliyska, and Mrs. Boriana Dimitrova. All of them, they have different views and different angles of what we are going to discuss, the main topics. So I'm sure that it will be a very, very interesting conversation and discussion. So enjoy, thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I think me and Boriana were here last year, maybe the year before that. And it's a very good that it's not only music in the evening, but also a professional event and discussions like that during the day. And this is important, it shows the professional approach that Peter and the team of A2 Jazz have. We don't have a pre-prepared questions, or I don't have a pre-prepared questions. So this will be human-generated event without any, structure generated by ChatGPT or Quote. Like a 5-pager plan of what should we talk about. We have a diverse group. Boriana has been involved in evaluating the impact of A2 Jazz for many years, so she knows the data from the customers, the people that come. Elena, on the other side, being in Mastercard, she has the data and the knowledge that we don't have access to, of what's happening with the payments, what's the impact, how a company decides to support such an event. And Mike has the deeper knowledge, understanding how to evaluate the impact of such events, how do you put them together, where is this event in comparison to others. So let's start with our guest. Being here, and can you, maybe for a start, explain us why it's important to evaluate the broader impact? It could be economic, it could be social, financial, ecological, whatever, of such an event. Isn't it easier just to skip that part and have only the fun in the evening? Why should we do that?
It's pretty easy to forget that. It depends on your pressures. Depending on the country and the context that you work in, there are lots of stakeholders that put a lot of pressure, whether it's funding, whether it's commercial entities, whether it's public sector, whether it's private sector. So it really does depend on the pressure points and who's actually asking you to do it. But I would say that it's fundamentally a moral question. Of course, it's a values question. It's about really understanding you as an event manager, why am I doing this? And unless you really, really understand why you're doing it, then in a sense, what's the point? We place a lot of faith on events that they just do things and they spill out these benefits, but actually without intentional design, they fundamentally don't. They do in some sense, bring people into a room, will be serendipitous, and that's great. But they could be so much more. And the example that I've got is of a cultural festival, music festival, performing arts festival, Edinburgh Fringe Festival, that I've worked with for several years. And if you ask those individuals who run the event, what is the impact of the event? They would be quite broad in terms of the social, cultural, economic impacts. But then when you ask a simple question around what is the impact on individual lives? There's 30,000 performers there. Do you track and think about their story, what they go on to? They're all there for a very, very specific reason, to leapfrog their careers. Sometimes they go on TV immediately afterwards if they've got a great review. Some people just have to go through the doldrums of finding lots of platforms to develop their brand and their image. But actually, we don't do enough work on the individual performer level to really understand the collective level. So my argument is ultimately, how can we ever understand the individual collective level when we don't fundamentally understand the person and what their journey is in it all? And I think now with big data and AI crunching huge data sets, I think we can do that a lot better, actually. So that's probably where I come from. So obviously, economic pressures from funders, but it is a fundamental values thing. Why do you exist? Why does the event exist? And what does it do for the individuals?
So just to make clear, the point you're making is that we are not doing that in order to explain to others, to our partners, and the people that fund the event and so on, the sponsors or the artists, but to understand it on a deeper level personally.
Yes.
Is it the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Follow-up question, but you don't have that at the beginning. So you cannot start an event by evaluating something that hasn't happened yet. So still in the early stages, it's gut feeling to an extent. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think as an economist, it's so important to understand your benchmarks. How do you ever understand impact when you don't have a very, very strong understanding of your starting point? So although you are missing data, you're missing evidence, you're missing insights at the very beginning, there are so many more insights that you can gather from other adjacent, very similar festivals that have gone on before to get a very good approximation of what the likely impact will be of more developed or emerging festivals. So you can use that data to be analogous to your own, and you use that as the benchmark to start with. And then you do proper longitudinal tracking over time to really understand the transformative effects. Otherwise, you're only ever looking at fragments of time. And that doesn't tell you impact, because impact is really just the relative difference between the starting point and the middle point and the end point. So people just often misunderstand that every event is woven within a tapestry of other events going on in the portfolio. But the biggest trap that people fall into is thinking that their event is the one intervention and they're looking at the impact of that event. But really, it's just part of a broader story about that place, about that community, about whoever you're looking at the impact for across the different levels.
Okay. So let's go to Elena and Mastercard. Can you give us some insight of how, first of all, how a company decides to be a partner of such an event? Do you have your own estimates, evaluation of the effects of the usage, payments, and so on? And do you share some of these data so that we can have a better knowledge of what's going on?
So first of all, thanks for having me. This is very different from the usual conferences I go to, so I feel so good. I'm back with the cool kids, so thanks a lot. So Mastercard, as you know, what's very important for us is the passions, one of which is events, human connection, but we also study them, right? We really believe and we really see in the data that an event has the ability to transform a destination, how people go there, how they perceive it. It has the ability to really uplift life to bring more tourists, to bring more shopping, to bring a sense of community, and not only the perception of it, but actually how things are on the ground. And we really believe that we can use the data, which is anonymized transactional data, that Mastercard sits on to really understand how these patterns take shape and to really understand who are the people who go to these festivals, how they shape by the way they spend. We all know that when we ask in a survey, we usually answer by who we want to be. But when we actually see where people spend and how they spend their time, we see what is the actual profile. And this becomes extremely important for both city councils, for tourism authorities, but also for festivals to understand how they fit in that bigger picture and how the effects can actually be measured. And this is where the data comes, not only to see the effect, but also to plan for the future and to see how we can shift so we can have a festival that, let's say, or an event that stresses certain aspects of the city or makes people stay longer or, in certain way, shapes their consumption to more sustainable ways. And I want to give an example we spoke about, which is an event we all know about. This was the Taylor Swift Eras Tour, which we did an extensive analysis of. And I have some notes because I really can't afford the Swifties coming after me if I mistake something. But it was an event that took 151 shows over 4 continents, and we studied the effects both in the US and we have some examples from Europe. But what we saw on average was that for the US specifically, people spend, we could see that they spend on average $40 more on merchandise than they would usually spend as a result of being part of this tour. And this is something we can see by, grouping people and seeing how they usually spend and how that spending varies in a different situation. So we're quite confident when we say that this spending was incremental, and that brought to the event organizers millions, 240 millions actually, incremental than they would have spent otherwise. Obviously, not every event is as big as the Taylor Swift tour. But I think the effects can be seen in the same methodology can be used for other events. What's also interesting is to see, for example, in Europe, there was 2 examples from Hamburg and from Gelsenkirchen, I think, if I'm saying it correctly, forgive me. There in Gelsenkirchen, which is a much smaller place, accommodation on concert nights and the nights before jumped by 171%, and in Hamburg by 60%. Not Hamburg, sorry, Munich. Here, I already committed a mortal sin. I think the Swifties will be after me. And the same can be seen for restaurants. So we see more than double jump in restaurants and also in the smaller city. And in Munich, we see a smaller jump, around 15%. So this gives us then information about how we can measure, we're using the same methodology, even smaller festivals. And I'll give you a very, very local example. Last year, we decided to apply the same methodology locally, and we did it for Hills of Rock Festival in Plovdiv. So we saw that there was a positive impact around the festival days in businesses that were located within 2.5 to 5 kilometers of the festival venue. And that actually coincides with a lot of the data we have from consumers in Bulgaria specifically, who say that they associate local businesses with higher quality and better value for money. And they actually, when they travel to go to festival and events, they would like to engage in smaller businesses, local businesses. So we think that's quite powerful in the way we not only evaluate what has been done and put it in perspective that is larger than the event itself, but plan for the future and see how we can shape the urban environment and festivals so they can be beneficial for everyone involved.
Boriana, you also have data and insights using the more sociological approach of asking people who come, where did they come from, how much money do they spend, for what is the reason that they are at the festival. So can you share some insights of the years that you have the knowledge?
Thank you. Sorry for... it's okay. Thank you for the invitation. It's always very interesting to share our opinions, our findings, and to listen to the questions. But first, I would like to say some preliminary statements. I believe that there is no one ideal survey, and each one will follow this ideal model and to do the same survey, etc. There are so many tools, too many tools as maybe cheeses in France, if we follow the same statement of General de Gaulle. So it's really very different to choose which tool to implement for one study, not only the festival, but for one commercial study, social study, political study. And that's why I think it's very, very important to know well the context. Maybe it is possible to be global context or local context. It is not possible to have always the same study with the same methodology, with the same data. There are too many data, but at the same time, it is difficult sometimes to receive the data. Initially, Petar asked you if you share the data. I firmly believe that you will share some data from the cashless payments. Petar promised us to have this data in order to build our model. So I think so that this year we will amplify our model with the data from Mastercard. So first, when we began, until now we have 4 surveys. 2019, 2022, 23, and now will be the 4th survey. And we decided to build some more comprehensive model, not just economic, not just sociological, and to be more broadly and to answer the needs of the organizers. So our model, I will not speak a lot about the data, maybe we will see them after the festival, but I would like to discuss here and to listen to your question about the model. We have 4-dimensional model. First, we have the social profile of the visitors. Social profile, socio-demographic, lifestyle, and as well loyal visitors and new visitors, which is important for the festivals, for the benefits, for the requirements of people. It is one part important. Second part, we have the estimation, the assessment of the festival as an event, performance, atmosphere, organization, which is important and which meets the needs of the organizers. What they can approve, what they can change. It is very important for them for some, let's say, policy reasons. I will mention one of them. There was a suggestion to move this festival to another place, near to the airport, as I know. Is it good or not? They will lose only royal fun, or they will lose the atmosphere. It will be another event. So there are different kinds of questions of assessment of the festival. I hope that they are important for the organizers. Third, we have the estimation of some, as we say, CSR practice. I prefer to say some non-tangible results. What we mean? The green policy, separate collection of waste, cashless payment, or other green policies. Other people know this, and if they appreciate it. Why? Because it is not, that's why I prefer to say that we try, and I think that it is necessary to broaden this aspect, some non-tangible results and effects of the festival. Because the festival, it is not just a musical event. I'm going to the concert, I'm leaving, etc. It is to build communities. And to build communities means to build some culture, some common culture. The people who we are here, we have maybe some very different values, but we have some common values. And it is very important to know and to understand what are the community's principles and values. And last but not least, absolutely, the economic effect. We use the method of revenues and expenses. We compare the expenses of the organizers, and we try to really to measure not only the effect in the area of the festival, but also outside, in the close area, which is difficult. I will not discuss now, but it is not so easy if we have not some objective data. Last survey, we had objective data from the companies who sell products on the festival, Art Bazaar and the other, and we could compare, and we have very similar results, and I hope that this year we'll be able to compare with the results, only the general results from the cashless payments. So it is really very important to understand and to say what is the return of investment. Each euro invested in the festival, what is the return rate? Not only in speaking economically, but speaking about the induced outcomes, which is also important. And I will stop here. I really believe that for one survey, it's important to be realistic, to be transparent, to understand what we measure and how we measure and why. And finally, which is very important, to be useful for the people who organize the festivals.
And just to build on that, it's not usually the case that when there is a festival in Bulgaria, somebody is doing that. And that's why it's really, we've done some work together on some other festivals, but...
You measured in Plovdiv, it was the night of museum in Plovdiv, which was very interesting experience. And I have a question from another festival, jazz festival on the Vetashko Plateau, but we don't know until now what will happen there. So here I could say that A2 Jazz is a beginner in this field, which is interesting as well, because there are not a lot of events who would like to be measured.
Listening into that, of the structure of how it's done in Bulgaria in A2 Jazz, how do you compare that to your experience? And additionally, is there a difference between a festival that's free, without tickets, so it's open to the public, so you don't know, the exact number of people that bought tickets for the different days and so on? Is there a different approach for festivals like, or concerts, Taylor Swift, you buy ticket and you know the crowd, or with festivals that have more of a, city impact as a celebration of the city and the music without the the ticket and the closed venue?
Yeah, the things that I've just heard, very similar methodologies, obviously all over the world. Lots of them change depending on the city that you look at. Every city has a different approach. We work primarily with Ottawa, I think I mentioned earlier, Ottawa, Victoria, Australia, the US. There are some cities out there that you can use as really good examples of just absolutely pushing the boundary on events, collecting as much data as possible. They have a very broad understanding of the development outcomes of them. They look beyond the economics. And actually, I would go so far as to say they would use Mastercard Visa data, for example, to understand flows of people and how spending intensifies in spaces that don't have too many tourists, and help actually use that data to overcome over-tourism challenges, which is obviously a huge problem. And events and festivals are great ways in which to transform people's consumption in places that need it. So they would use that data to understand, is it going into socioeconomically deprived areas? Is spending intensifying businesses that wouldn't normally be inside the tourist bubble? So you've got places like that, and I could reel off a whole list of them, and they have great impact models and calculators. There's 101, there's like 1,000,001, really, different approaches that they've got. But they all share a really similar approach. And actually, we don't want to talk about AI too much in such a human creative space. But if you do deep research using some of these AI devices, you'll be able to synthesize many of the approaches that are taken to come up with a model that might work for your context. I think that's where it can be actually really useful, certainly with the dry stuff like methodology and data collection and stuff like that. So from the conversations that we've had so far, it seems like, you know, I guess Sofia and the events in that portfolio, and from what I know and have read and researched, it's early days. Certainly early days, thinking primarily about economic, which is sort of, many of us in this industry talk about tourism and the financial side and the economic side as really the exhaust fumes. That's how they put it often. The exhaust fumes of this industry. They are the thing that is so vitally important to funders, but fundamentally not really why we do it. We do these things, and every event does something different. You know, I went on a podcast recently and said, like, you know, something like Glastonbury, those big music and cultural festivals, people escape their kids, debt, the life that they hate. So people go into those spaces for very different reasons than they go into business conferences, a little bit like this, to connect, to network, to come up with business opportunities, as well as share intellectual ideas. But then you look at sports. Sports is incredibly good at soft power, political influence, branding, putting destinations on the map. So they require fundamentally so many different sorts of data that are really messy, that aren't spending. And a good example of an advanced event festival impact evaluation space is one that really sees the big picture, almost thinks quite philosophically. Two features are really important to the methodology behind this, which invariably most events and festivals still don't have, much to my dismay. One is that every event should have a theory of change. It's incredible that actually many of the events and festivals, and I've worked with like hundreds now, I would say about 10, 20% have a theory of change, which is, and I'll try, and this is not academic, by the way, even though it says theory in the title. This is a methodology that's adopted across all industries, which is that you start with a benchmark at the beginning, you start with very good intentions, and you put the right sort of inputs in place in order to achieve those intentions. And then you have the process and the programming of the event, the outputs, and then the outcomes, which are the immediate benefits of these things. And then you have the impacts, which are the medium to long term. And it's essentially a roadmap, and it's a very clear method, a very clear roadmap of what you need to collect, when to evidence what you're collecting. But there is, and I'm going to really bore you, maybe, there is a new, more advanced theoretical basis for understanding why events exist and the impact of events, and it's called field configuring events. I'll try not to bore you, but it's sociologists in the 20th century, they're essentially trying to understand why is it that the world changes and ebbs and flows in different ways. Well, how does the world change? Business school lot, Chicago, Harvard, Manchester Business School said, that's too fluffy, we need a logical basis on why things change. And they try to understand these things called field configuring events. How do events reconfigure fields? Okay, what are fields? Fields are economic fields, cultural fields, industrial fields, but it's also big social movements. And you only have to look at popular culture to understand, why is it that Me Too, Black Lives Matter, etc., why do they always coalesce around events? And it's because they obviously have a huge transformation on mindsets, on shifting the window of how we think. And so there are really detailed frameworks out there that help you articulate your impact, but no one's really using them. So we can collect all the data we want, but if we don't really understand the impact and why we're doing it, and we've done that groundwork, it's really hard to tell a story. So that's what I would probably say on that. I don't know whether I answered your question, to be honest, but yeah.
If I can add to that, it's usually if something makes sense emotionally and culturally, it will make sense economically. Or if it doesn't make sense economically, then something is broken in the how you put it together. But predominantly economics, it may be boring, but it's a science on human action. It's not about numbers or finances, it's about human action. And this is embodied in how we interact with each other in festivals and how society changes. Looking at how humans are interacting with businesses, what is the role of festivals and what you do there of changing our perception of how we use money and switching to electronic payments and so on? I mean, obviously we are a bit behind in there, but getting there with the other countries, is there a role when you're partnering with a festival of helping that transition?
I think that definitely comes to convenience probably in most festivals. So I think that also, even though, as you say, we're a bit behind, I don't entirely agree, because I think human beings will always choose what is more convenient for them, and without trying to go there, but there is certain advantages to cashless payments. But I think like how you pay and how you are at a festival, I think is really secondary to how you experience the whole festival. And this is actually a shift we're seeing, and we've done some research also in Bulgaria, which is interestingly in the first place in Europe, in these changing attitudes, and that people are really valuing much more not acquiring things, but experiences, things that bring them closer together, give them an inspiring experience. And 75% of Bulgarians say that they would like to participate in an experience that doesn't involve anything digital, so digital detox, and more than 60% seek something that has a community effect. So festivals, by definition, are exactly those kind of events, and Bulgaria is actually #1 in Europe in these changing trends. Out of all Europeans, Bulgarians, 81%, say they really prioritize experiences in their spending to other things. Of course, there's things like essentials where we all spend on that, but in that discretionary spending, where we can also see it, that the spending in the categories linked to experiences, travel, wellness, sports, pets actually are really increased, and also that is, I think, also reflected in the behavior. How people then pay becomes, I think, secondary overall in the grand scheme of things. Cashless payments have, I think, doubtless advantages, and we believe that a smooth running of a festival includes that. But I think this is more reflected in how people in general see themselves, especially in an increasingly digital world, where those experiences that connect them to humans, to experience especially music, where you can really stay with you way after you've left the concert, and you've really linked the destination and you've become part of its story. That is really what we're seeing at the forefront, and what we really think makes festivals special.
Boriana, can you share some insights into the attitude of the people that come to the festival, how they see it? Do they see it as a celebration of the city or just another festival? Just a weekend in the summer? And also, are we succeeding in explaining these effects? Because that's the understanding the impact. Are we succeeding in explaining that, apart from the 3 days or 4 days of the festival when there was media interest? Now with the debate on the effects of Giro d'Italia, which is a foreign event coming here and showing how things can be done, and seeing these effects, expecting the Eurovision, which another pressure on, okay, let's see what's the effect. Somebody put a number over there of how much it will cost and what will be the effect, and everybody started to repeat that number. I think it was just a Facebook post by a random guy. So do you think that this will help to better explain?
Yes, thank you. Okay, we can outline some trends because we have our, as I already said, first survey 2019, and what we saw in this survey. We had almost 75% of people who are living in Sofia, who are coming here, and we had a substantial part of the people living around South Park, where the festival took place. So it was, let's say, more or less Sofia festival with the people who know this part of the town. What we saw after that, maybe, because if we are speaking sociologically, we should remember that the second and the third wave have been conducted in 2022 and 2023, just after COVID, which is important. So it is important to not to put all on the festival, but the changing of the attitudes, of the desire to travel, to see other cities, etc. But we register higher number of people who are coming from other cities, even from other countries. Not the main reason is not the festival, to be honest. It is very few. I think that around 2% of the people explicitly said, I'm here for the festival. The other had other plans, business or friends or relatives, or just spend a vacation, because you know that we have a lot of expat, Bulgarian expat. They are living in other countries, and when they are coming here on the festival, they have there, I'm very happy that you mentioned once again the communities and what they have. They have their meetings on the festival, and they spend really, they feel like a community. So the trend is to move to other cities, to broader community, to broader visitors, not just Sofia, not just, let's say in the beginning, young people. It is one important for me trend. Another is that we have a different proportion of the loyal and newcomers, new visitors. In the beginning, it was not the very, very beginning, 19, we had only 16% of people who said, I'm coming more than 3 times. Now it doubled. We have almost 33, 34% who are coming more than 3 times. So it is possible really to say this festival is, let's say, a model, a way to build this culture, community, and to be something sustainable and not just. We have some, let's say, not very powerful, but we have some tools to measure. If they will recommend the festival to the others, if they are inclined to come here only for the festival, and we can see the increasing of these numbers. Until now, the main reason are other reasons to come in Sofia, but which is very important when you are in Sofia to have this destination, very important. From this point of view, it's very important that we have almost the same dates, the same place, because it's not just the place, but it is something which is related to the atmosphere. So I think that it is something which we need much more efforts and years to become like Montreal, like Montreal, etc. But we are on this in a good direction. And you had another question about the economic now.
Having the discussion on the effect of Giro d'Italia and also expecting the Eurovision, how will this help us explain the effects of such events?
I can't see if Petar is here. I will share my opinion, which is maybe controversial. I think that A2Jazz did their best to have broad impact outcome on the image of Sofia, on the image of Bulgaria, like another, not the poorest country, not the country which is far away in the Balkans, etc. To make the next step, they need much larger support, common action between the city of Sofia, the municipality of Sofia, and A2Jazz and the other festival organization, maybe the state sometimes. It is not just an initiative. It is not enough to have only the organizers. If Sofia municipality, if the other cultural organization have not the idea that we should have another advertising, another efforts to put Sofia on the map of these festivals, it will be not only easy, it will be impossible only for the organizer. In this aspect, Giro d'Italia had huge impact, but we should remember that they already have their advertising, their world famous brands, etc. So we need more efforts. If I can judge from our surveys, we need more efforts and more support, more policy from Sofia municipality. And even if we would like to develop, we have priorities to develop and to see Sofia as an important place for culture and for festival culture.
Okay, so think if you have any questions in mind, and potentially if you raise your hand, I may see it or may not. I'll have another question while we are thinking, but please, make a gesture so I can see you. I really want to stress, so while we were answering, the mic will go there. We talked about the approach from the organizer's point of view of what's the cost of putting such an event together and what's the benefit for the, surrounding areas, the city and so on. I really want you to stress out something that we discussed outside, that from a broader point of view, the costs are also positive effects. So if we are paying the rent for the venue, which is a local venue, if we have sound and lights and photographers and all the crew that is helping this be put together, it could be put as a cost on the table, but it's a positive effect in its additional demand for all of the people that are behind this. And this will usually be counted as a positive impact.
Yeah, just trying to connect that actually to a conversation that I had with Martin Green, who's the director of Eurovision. We had a podcast, and it was called Hyperlocalization. So ultimately, when you host a Eurovision, in his perspective, it is your decision as to who you invite into the supply chain, right? And who you decide to invite versus don't invite is going to have a huge impact on, one, your costs, but two, who benefits and how that benefit, talking as an economist, sort of trickles down into the economy. If you decide to invite people that are non-Sofian, is that a thing? Is that a word? I don't know, probably not. Non-Sofian, into the supply chain, then expect the money to leak out and therefore not have the knock-on trickle social benefits of people using that money to spend in your local economy and on lots of different things. So yeah, I agree. His concept that we talked about a lot was hyperlocalization, that fundamentally, if you're hosting any sort of event, wherever possible, it should be fundamentally local. Some people draw radiuses around places to show exactly that the money should only stretch this far. That is really, really important. And every event should have that wherever possible, but recognizing that costs are costs, and then sometimes you have to go beyond that radius. But for a Eurovision, it is all won and lost in the weeds. What individual, what organization, what actors are you including in the cultural programming before, during, after? how do you encourage people to, and this is a problem with all events, that they act like an alien satellite. They sort of drop in, a bit like Eurovision actually. They sort of drop in, they create last miles, which are the bits between the transport hub and the hotels. And if, I want to be boring, geographers would argue that they discipline the space in around events. So they put shuttle buses that shuttle people between venues and hotels and all the different areas. And if you shuttle people across and you force people very quickly to only spend primarily in those destinations that then don't expect hardly any of the money to actually leak out, because to your point, Giro Italia, sponsors, they're going to activate, they're going to keep money within their space, and then it's going to bugger off to a Swiss headquarters or something like that, right? That's why your data is so important, because I would argue that most of my work's done in the Olympics. Most of the money in the Olympics, most of the way that the Olympics is designed is in a very disciplined space to make sure people get to the events, and they use that to justify based on health and safety grounds, but also to make sure sponsors get the money that they're promised. But then you look at flows of people in the Olympics, and they don't really go outside of the areas. And of course, it depends on the space that you're looking at. If it's Rio de Janeiro, it was viewed as quite risky to go outside these tourist bubbles, so then people didn't spend. And so the event organizer has a fundamental responsibility to take that data, to understand how they can use that data to redesign the flows of people, because if you flow people in different areas and you intentionally design that, then that will ultimately increase the outcome. So that plus hyper-localization is a strategy for making sure that they benefit actually the people that you want them to.
Okay, so let's take a question. I saw that there was some. Yep.
Test. Hello, everyone. I'm a member of the Bulgarian diaspora who is here for a holiday, and I'm attending the festival. Thank you for the wonderful event. I am the music director of a national monument in Canada, in the city of Montreal, which is literally placed in a location called Quartier des Spectacles, which is next to another location called Place des Festivals. So my question is, how do we measure impact in a place which is saturated by events? So I organize a number of events with my colleagues and the team, and there are people who attend those events, and there are people who spend money. However, there are so many events taking place at the same time that it is difficult for me to understand who exactly is attending, because as Ms. Chardakliyska mentioned, people respond to surveys the way they want to be seen and not with the real data. So people would come, they would come to the concert in the place where I'm the director, and then they will go eat in a restaurant which has nothing to do with us, and then they will attend another festival, and then they will buy a souvenir from the city of Montreal that has nothing to do with us. So how do we design, how do we look for data that measures specifically what our impact is? Thank you very much. And the microphone, what should I do with it now?
It can stay there.
Okay.
If there is another question. Yeah, so who wants to? Oh.
Well, it's great. I need to do this to see you. That is a great question. It's a great question. The simple answer is that obviously there's very demarcated spaces whereby people consume within that festival space, I'm guessing, because I don't know the space that you're talking about at all. And so therefore there's a very, very clear direct income that you can have. I don't know the event, so I can't quite understand how people move and how people consume and stuff like that. So I've got to be more general in my response. It's also about how you organize the portfolio events in a time and space. So I don't know how closely you work with the festival directors of the other events and festivals, but most events and festivals act in silos and isolated, and they think that they have that mentality that, well, what was my contribution? Actually, I think that the question is more place-based, And it's about, well, what are we doing all collectively together to understand our collective impact and not being individual, although recognizing that you have your own pressures, right? And you have your own funders. So I think that there are, I don't know the layout of your space and how people move around it and how people consume, but I would guarantee that there are very, very clear direct ways that you could use survey methodologies, various other qualitative and quantitative methodologies to help understand that impact. But then having very strong collaboration across all the other events within that portfolio, whether that portfolio is very specific to that geography, or that space, that ward, we'd call it in the UK, that ward within that space. But recognizing that measuring impact of events is perilous just to begin with, because it is intertwined with everything else that's going on in that space. You know, certainly when you look at more broader changes like regeneration and development and well-being, you know, you are just one part of a very, very complicated puzzle. And recognizing that you play your part, and you're not going to definitively or absolutely be able to say things. But one thing I did really want to say, not plug, but say, is that it's all about the 5 Vs. If you want a sort of basic method of understanding the data side of this, because data is power, thinking about the 5 Vs. So it's about the volume of data that you collect. It's about the variety of data, because without a variety, you can't triangulate and put together a really complex argument. It's about the velocity of that data, how quickly you collect it. And it's about the value of that data, which means whether you're collecting data that actually aligns to the intention and impact that you wanted to create. To reach the 5th V, and this 5th V is really important, is veracity. We're all trying to come up with a truthful picture as to what the impact of our event is, but we try and conclude and come up with conclusions about the impact of our event way too quickly before we've actually collected the data. And my sense, and I've advised, I used to work for as director of research for the people that ran the London 2012 Olympics, right through as a professor in events. So I've seen it on the University of Paris. So I've seen it on the scientific side. Fundamentally, people don't understand that process. They know what they roughly want to achieve, but there's so much hard work, there's so much that you don't know about collecting data and measuring impact. It's about really being robust. And now a very quick plug, me and the former head of evaluation of London 2012 Olympics is just writing a book that's coming out in January called Evaluating Events, where we take essentially every single methodology around the world and synthesize it together to come up with some form of standard. I hope you would argue that it's rubbish or crap or it's missing something. Of course, it will always be. But we are missing that standard. And that's one of the reasons why I and a couple of people founded the Centre for Events and Festivals, which is the first ever international professional body for events, because we deserve it. We don't have one, which is weird. Engineers have it, medical practitioners have it, architects have it. But in events, we never had a professional body. So therefore, how could we ever have any professional standards about what we do, because it's essentially the Wild West. This industry is the Wild West. Everyone just does what they really want to. And so that's been a thing that we've done over the last 15 months. So if anyone's interested, do come and have a chat. But I promise this wasn't trying to be a plug, but it is so instrumental to the question that you asked.
Elena, you want to add something?
I just wanted to add, first of all, congratulations. I mean, it seems like you've achieved the holy grail in the place where you're in, where there's so many events and so many festivals that you cannot really tell what people are coming for. And I think that's great. I mean, this is what we talked about, that people tend to associate the place with these positive experiences, and they probably feed off of each other. Probably you could isolate, I mean, if we take the methodology of what I described with really big events, you can apply it to smaller ones. And it will be probably super interesting to see what are the events or occasions that pull people into the city, and whether they go there primarily for events, or as you said yourself, you're here for vacation, spending time with your family, and you happen to be at a festival. So definitely I think that's a great problem to have in general.
So do we have another one? Okay.
Thank you very much for a very insightful conversation and notes. And I'm very happy that you addressed to both established and accomplished festivals and also emerging ones, how to get started. First, I want to introduce myself. I am coming from Armenia and I'm coming for the festival specifically. And I represent a music label and an industry association in Armenia. And my question is completely the vice versa of the previous one. When there is a saturation, in my case, in my country, it's like it's more chaotic when the industry is thriving with major events that are boosting the tourism, and the policymakers are evaluating them with data, with the economic effect and all. In this kind of mindset, when everything is measured with this economic effect, how many people are coming, how many tourists are coming, how the restaurants and the HoReCa sector is thriving, how you can start a festival in this kind of measurements, especially when there is an audience development problem. Because when you host like a big name, you don't have an audience development problem because they have already the name and the brand. In a market when most of the festivals are based on big names, even the local names, what you should pay attention to, what benchmarks, what milestones or what measurables you should consider when establishing a new festival that has the problem for audience development and has a problem of this economic effects for attracting sponsors or selling tickets, because none of them would work in such kind of scenario. If that makes sense. Thank you.
I think this was partly touched by your first response, telling that you need to know the environment, the other events happening around, and how this new initiative will fit in there. But who wants to share some thoughts on that?
Say the first step is not sociological. You have the enthusiasm, you have the idea what you would like to do, and the second step is sociological. When you have to reflect, to answer questions, and to say what happened. So the idea is to have some benchmark survey, which will be not complete, and I remember very well, we started our surveys with less indicators. After that, we kept some of them in order to have the monitoring, but we changed some of them. And if I can make a bridge between two questions, from my point of view, the idea is to mix subjective data from surveys and objective data. We have big data. It is not easy to obtain big data, but as an organizer, and it is easier for organizer to convince the people around the festival, around the location, to give some data of their revenues, of what happened, because it will help them next year to attract more visitors, more tourists, etc. It is not so easy to have only subjective data. Subjective data, I'm working on this, we are polling agency, but only subjective data, it's good, it's enough. Usually we ask the people how much money you spent about drinks, about food, about overnight, etc., to see not only what you bought in the festival, in the area festival, what you bought outside. So it's, but sometimes it's really very difficult. Smaller is the festival, more clear is the impact. I already mentioned this festival, the Vetașcu Plateau, is very clear what is the local impact. Sofia, it's more difficult. Speaking about Montreal, I have been in Montreal to see my daughter and the baby, and to visit the festival on the streets, etc. They bought for the baby earphones And I don't know if it was indirect or not indirect, because it was just to visit the festival. It is very wildly, very interesting. It's wonderful for me, a festival. But it's really very difficult to understand if I buy something from the other areas, from the other. It is something, that's why it is better, I think, to combine really some data from surveys and to combine to ask for different big data to what happened if we speak about different bank payment or other, to help to have common approach with them. And finally, excuse me, but notice, there is another challenge. We try to overcome this challenge this and past year. You are on a festival. You would like to listen to music. It's very wildy. How you will answer a survey? This year and past year, we had a QR code. You can put the QR code on your phone, and when you enter home, and you are more peaceful, and you can answer. So if you see people this night on the festival with the QR code, and they ask you or your friends to fulfill the questionnaire, please help them. It will be useful for each one of us. So we have different challenges on each step. That's why I said in the beginning, we have not only one ideal model, but we should adapt depending on the festival, depending on the requirements and what will be useful. But really the better is to practically combine subjective and objective data, big data.
Mike, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, no, all really good points. I was just writing a couple of answers to your question. I guess your question is sort of arguably the most purest of all the questions, because it's the reason why we're here. Lots of entrepreneurs, lots of individuals need to feel empowered to create their own festivals. Lots of reasons for that. One, to plug a gap in the things that connect us as humans. In this weird AI age whereby lots of us are disconnected. So never before have events and festivals fundamentally become so important, right? There's two real simple answers to the question. One is there's obviously a huge amount of models and events and cities, towns all over the world that have just been in your position that you can just simply learn from. There's so many cases. I think the events field sort of has grown over the last 50 years, and there are just thousands of cases now. Thousands of cases. So there's loads of really interesting models out there. If I was you, where would I start? I would probably think, I would moonshoot, and I would think, well, what really fundamentally is the reason why my event should exist? What is it standing for beyond the economics? But where does it fit in the portfolio? I would understand it within the tapestry of the events that are going on already. But I want to also say a very broader role, and this is my final point, which is that I feel, and I could definitely speak from the UK context, is that the public sector role in hosting events and festivals has completely ceded. I think that 50 years of neoliberalism, we won't go too far there, but 40, 50 years of neoliberalism, the privatization, the deregulation of the commons and the commodification of society more broadly has had one damaging impact, which is ultimately that Live Nation, Superstruct, all these large-scale, there's essentially 4 very large music festival organizations that dominate most of the market. And councils, certainly in the UK, I can definitely speak for and give numbers for, but around Europe, they have been plugging gaps in public finance. And what they're essentially been doing is selling off public land. Well, actually selling, quite literally selling. So, for example, half of the Olympic Park in London is 50% owned by Saudi Arabia, which is the biggest public park in Europe, just for the record. So we've either been selling off land or we're only renting it to the highest bidder. And the highest bidder is invariably the big ones, the big festivals. And so we're just about to get a new prime minister called Andy Burnham, and he is vowed to take back public control over lots of things, water, energy, etc. We reached out to his team to talk about, well, actually, the question now is about taking back public control of space. and streets, parks, recreation areas, and stuff like that. Beaches, mountains. There's various different topographies that we could talk about. And really have a strong public sector program that then funds people like you within your destinations. And because, and I promise this is the final point, one thing that we fundamentally lack is the historical notion of the master of ceremony, which is actually where we've come from in events. That's our original anthropological root in events, which is that there was one person, the festival director, Petar, that orchestrates everything. We don't have that person, just for the record, for destinations and host cities. That has been gone. The teeth of destination management organizations and tourist boards have gone. They used to be powerful. Now they're not powerful whatsoever all around the world. They were the ones that stitched everything together, understood how the jigsaw connected and what should be funded when, and give you support. No one's there now. No one's there. There's no master of ceremony anymore. It's all individualized, like we'd expect of a post-capitalist world. And therefore everything's fragmented. So those are my points.
Okay, thank you. And as we are staying here after the panel and there is some time, I think if there are other questions, you can approach some of us and we can talk out of the panel. Just last 60-second answer by Elena. I have a question on, as probably most of the people that are organizing festivals, concerts, events, or watching the World Cup on venues, they contact you in a way to facilitate payments, be a partner, and so on. Do you see a growth in such interest? And related to that question, new people coming out with new ideas, new festivals, looking for partners. Is there any change, any growth, or is it just business as usual?
It's a tough question to answer because what we do locally, we do partner with a lot of festival and events, from things like Hills of Rock, as I said, to a very local event in Sofia called the Big Table, Gulama Tamasa, which is like literally a neighborhood event that is exactly that part of building community. We partner with Fest Team and do activations and promotions throughout the summer because we really believe in the power of music and how it can bring people together. But I think in general, Mastercard as a brand through the Priceless platform globally, I mean, we are partners of some of the biggest events, and for better or worse, I don't sit on top of that, so I cannot tell you if there is more or less interest, but I think we're definitely represented there where we can offer either a unique experience or a unique view into what we call passions. So whether it's music or gastronomy or sports or culture. So this is something that is, I think, essential to our brand, and we're always happy to be part of it.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank to our guests and to all of you, and we should have a short break, and then there is the second panel, so thank you.
Thank you.